Smart 24, driving business.
Hello and a very warm welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today and for watching Smart 24 TV, where we drive your business. My name is Anthony Sebale and I'm your host. This is The Point, where we get to analyze economic policy. Of course, we get to interact with different experts and of course get expert opinions on several issues that are pertinent to our economy. And of course, to be part of the show, you can follow us on Twitter at Smart24TV now. You can also get to our YouTube channel on our live stream. We are live at our YouTube channel, Smart24TV Live, for your live feed, of course, from Smart24TV. And of course, you can always catch us daily here on Mondays and Wednesdays at exactly 7 p.m. Now, today, the talk on the Sustainable Development Goals, of course, has taken media by the storm. As per 2023, we are halfway the 2030 agenda of the Sustainable Development Goals that was set by UN back in 2015 in September. And just a few months and actually weeks from now, there will be a summit, of course, to evaluate the progress of the Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations in New York in September this year. However, in the context of Uganda, the Sustainable Development Goals, according to government, have been, at least to a certain extent, synergized with the plans that we have as a country. For example, the NDP3, which is about to get expired as well. And we move on to, of course, NDP4 and several other programs like the National Sustainable Development Goals Roadmap 2018-2020, and a couple of others like the National Standard Indicator Framework, which have been put in place to ensure that Uganda conforms to the Sustainable Development Goals. These Sustainable Development Goals are 17 in number, and they tackle quite a number of issues, including eradication of poverty, hunger, health, and a couple of other economic, social, as well as political aspects. Now, joining me on the show tonight to discuss more about what the SDGs progress is like in Uganda's perspective is none other than Dr. Owomugasho Daisy, who is, of course, the Chief Technical Director at the African Parliamentarians Network on Sustainable Development Goals. You're most welcome, Dr. Owomugasho.
Thank you. Good evening, viewers.
Yes. Dr. Owomugasho, before we get matters off the ground here, could you clearly tell us about Sustainable Development Goals and the main objective behind UN's, of course, starting in 2015, laying out this agenda for the UN members to follow the Sustainable Development Goals? What are these Sustainable Development Goals?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, and I'm particularly excited that I was part of the group or the people who participated in the formulation of the SDGs. At one point, somewhere towards in 2015, I represented Sub-Saharan Africa civil society organizations to give our views or my views on what we needed in the SDGs. And some of you, if you remember, this was after a continuation or the after of the Millennium Development Goals. So Millennium Development Goals had done their part, and we had not achieved maybe what the world had wanted. So this was followed by the Sustainable Development Goals, and they stem from the word sort of sustainable. What can be done so that the economies, the people, the world continues moving. So on 25th September in 2015, the world leaders committed to transforming our world by 2030. So they're looking at a transformed world And I think if you look at maybe the Uganda economy, you're also looking at, is this transformation actually taking place? Maybe that's what you are asking.
Yeah.
So this was an agenda to see an opportunity to demonstrate that governments can actually improve people's lives and the health. And it was a framework around which the whole world was supposed to see this transformation to make sure that all aspects of people's lives are actually addressed and all people move together in their development aspects.
Interesting. So 2015, that means the target was to achieve this in 15 years.
That's right. So from 2015 to 2030, that was supposed to be 15 years. The Millennium Development Goals had also been actually 15 years. So now this was another 15 years for the Sustainable Development Goals.
In my view, I would think, wouldn't the 15 years be really a very short time to achieve such very ambitious goals? Looking at just a few of them, like poverty eradication, having people earning at least $1.25 US. You're looking at health, very issues that are seemingly huge. Wasn't 15 years really quite ambitious?
In a way, it was an ambitious aspect, but like I said, the word is also sustainable. If you can put in place, if the world, the economies, the government can put in place something that is going to continuously improve, to continuously change, that was the sustainability. Yes, it was a short time, but with the commitment of everybody and looking at these goals, the way they sort of interact with each other. No goal or target is standalone. So if you're looking at poverty, you're looking at water, you're looking at health, and you're looking at all countries. So together, this was seen as a target or a goal with the goals which would be actually achieved within 15 years.
Yeah. Well, in 2019, Uganda's progress on SDGs was ranked 140 out of over 162 countries. And when you look at the global index, they had at least 52.6%, declining from the 125th position, according to the SDG Global Index, showing a little bit of sliding back. What could you say currently, when now we are in 2023, halfway through the journey? Can you provide an overview of how the SDGs have actually been monitored, how you can evaluate them at the moment in Uganda's perspective?
Okay, yeah. So you talked about the SDG goals, and you actually said there are 17 goals. But within those goals, they also have targets, sort of below. And within the 17 goals, we have 169 targets. And under those targets, there are also about 232 indicators. So each of those, it's not just tracking the goals, you also track the targets and the indicators. For example, the SDG number 1, ending poverty in all its forms, has 7 targets. And it also has 14 indicators. So each of those have to be looked at critically to see where the country or our country, Uganda, is moving, whether it is actually being transformed or not. So what is interesting is that Uganda is seen as maybe doing considerably okay. But the context in which the measurement takes place also has to be considered. Out of the 232 global indicators, only 202 are relevant to the Ugandan context. Or when they're saying now, if you're talking about, for example, blue oceans, or those don't apply to Uganda, something like that. So only 202 are relevant, and 29 are non-applicable. That means 29 are not applicable. But also our system, if you go to UBOS and whatever, those who are capturing data, they are saying they have the capacity to monitor only 85 out of the 202 applicable indicators. So some, like 45, are easily available or fully available. Some have no data. Maybe the data is not easily available. So this puts Uganda at a 42% applicable indicators.
Yeah.
So you may be doing well, but the marking scheme now has gone
Down.
has sort of gone down. So the 42% are the applicable indicators which assessments are being done.
Yeah.
So once this has been done, that's why you see that now we are doing a little bit better. But also these are some of the indicators which are maybe critical to us. If you're looking at poverty, you're looking at health, you're looking at water. So that is how Uganda is doing in terms of data availability and tracking.
What can you use? We have talked about us having 42%. In terms of priorities, what do you think are those SDGs that government has prioritized or should be prioritizing? Yes, we don't have all applicable to us, but I know there are those that are directly applicable to our, first of all, national economic transformation, like the socio-economic transformation, like the president usually calls it. What would you list amongst those?
Okay, I think, like I said, they are all interdependent. And maybe you can't say one is more of a priority compared to the other. Of course, we want to end poverty, but once you end poverty, how do you end it? If somebody doesn't have water, doesn't have health services. So if one indicator is lagging much behind the other, it sort of pulls down the others. But the focus for government has been on those issues on what we call as sort of the basic, poverty, gender, health services, water, and all that. But we find that there is a big gap in terms of other indicators that are really critical for the transformation, like industrialization, the digitization. So government, if we are here looking at the parish development model, maybe it is looking at how they can have the communities involved in and supported to develop. But what about maybe their digitization? They're saying we'll get Wi-Fi's in sub-counties and all that. So we haven't reached there. So we have some of these, and where the global economy is going right now, you're looking at digitization, you're looking at industrialization, you're looking at technology. So if we are still here with the whole, then what chances do we have of a transformed economy?
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. The government has put in place the National Development Plan as a means of attaining some of these goals. And when you look at NDP 3, which is about also to expire, we're going into NDP 4, one of the things they have looked at is monetization of the economy. In others, bringing people into the money economy through programs like you've mentioned, the parish development model. Now, given the fact that we've just witnessed, for example, the reading of the budget, and still government's priority is the parish development model, so to say, and a couple of others like Emyoga, do you think we are still moving in the right direction in as far as especially the first SDG is concerned and poverty in all its forms?
If I may look at, you are talking about end poverty in all its forms. Currently, all the challenges sort of still remain. The score is sort of stagnating, and actually it is performing at less than the 50% required rate. So we are not doing so well in that sense. And maybe that's why government is saying now, let's go to Emyoga, let's go to the parish development model to be able to reach that last person. What is not clear, what has not been clear, I've not delved so much, but when you hear from the media, you hear from people, you hear from even some of the implementers, the parish development model maybe is not going as they had expected it to perform. The intention may have been there to make sure that nobody is left behind. The last person is actually being accommodated within the government system, the government planning system. But after that, how many people have actually accessed that? How many people have been reached? Who is actually benefiting? Are these the people, the poor people, actually being reached by this Emyoga, by the parish development model? So the principle, the intent was there, but we are seeing maybe ways in which it can be looked at, re-examined and reformulated to make sure that it actually benefits the poor people as it should.
And in terms of these programs, what do you think is lacking to reach out to these populations? Because one of the things that we've seen in the past 1 year, for example, just the parish development model as an example, is that we've seen, for example, misappropriation of funds sometimes, and then there are hindrances like financial illiteracy that, despite the fact that governments put effort in ending poverty, there are things that are not directly linked to ending poverty that are actually hampering government's move. So in context of ending poverty in the SDG goal number 1, how can government reach out, especially in changing the mindset of Ugandans, in reaching out to those populations that are illiterate and would want to be financially literate at this point in time?
I think maybe there's a combination of factors. I'm saying we have a population that has been living the way they are. And some, as actually in the NDP, say they have a sort of a dependency syndrome, which is being sort of broken through mindset change. Mindset change is the most powerful vehicle that can be used for people, for communities. We've used it where we have been working for a long time. And it is a tool that can help communities actually become owners, authors of their own development. But it is a process that also takes some time. And the government has to be patient. If somebody has been used to maybe not working, has been used to getting some free stuff, to be able to change and say, now you have to start working, you have to pay school fees, you have to do all this, it becomes a bit of a challenge. So mindset change is critical. But we also have these policies that have been put in place, and you have pointed out some of the shortcomings within those policies. Has the money reached? They talked about people forming groups. People formed groups. Some, I understand, were formed there and then. Some had been in existence. I don't know how many groups right now which have benefited. I'm not very sure. But when you look at it, when you ask most local governments have not dispersed. And we are halfway sort of through the model. So if people have not yet received the money, they're saying, we'll add on next year, we'll add on next year. And most of the money, I think, is also going into, I don't know whether we would call it more of implementation, or the people who are supposed to be working rather than the beneficiaries. So people are spending time in terms of maybe studying or workshops or going, but the actual people who are getting the money are also limited.
So the implementers are spending on themselves, I would say.
I think, okay, I don't have, but that seems to be like it, because funds are being released, but the people, the community members, the population, the citizens, if you look at the number, then most have not yet got. Recently, I was talking to some district leaders, actually in the Western Uganda, and we were saying that when you put up the criteria for determining who is poor, who is supposed to benefit, the criteria is not clear. I was talking to somebody, the planner for, I think, one of the districts. I said, we according to this criteria, we got 300 people. And yet we know that people are actually poor. But when they were talking about the income, how much income, the questionnaire, how much income do you get? They say, I sell matoke, I do this, I sell beans, then my income is maybe 3 million. But that 3 million, they've not removed the cost of labor. So somebody thinks that you're rich because you have income worth 3 million. But you have spent 6 months investing time, resources, but at the end of the day, the formula says, you are above the what? So they couldn't get people to release the money to. So there is
because it looked like it was so stringent. You had to be impoverished.
Yes.
To benefit. To benefit.
So then, and I think also the scare, again, I think some mismanaged the resources. Those who have not yet, they are being too careful. So either way, the beneficiaries are
few.
They are suffering. They are not getting what they are supposed to get. Because the ones who started, maybe didn't start in the right way. These ones are saying, no, I have to be careful to make sure that I tick everything. And in the process, people are not getting what they are supposed to get.
Wow, interesting. Still on poverty eradication, point number 1. When you look at 1.3, it says implement nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all, including floors by 2030, including achieving substantial coverage for the poor and the vulnerable. Social protection, what is your view on social protection in Uganda? We have social protection bodies like NSSF that have grown over the years. Would you say we have achieved in social protection?
Of course, I think based on how NSSF started, I think a lot of progress has been made in terms of people saving for the future, trying to keep something for the future. And of course, you have government also, the pensioners who are also part of that. But if you look at it critically, the percentage of the population who are served by that, within that bracket, is also minimal.
Yeah.
I'm not sure aware of the percentage, but it is around maybe less than 10% or so, within the 10 to 15% range. So what happens to the rest of the population? They are not covered. And that's
especially
why,
in the informal sector.
Yes, especially in the informal sector. So that's why they're saying now proposals are coming up. Can we have alternative ways of saving? I think we've seen these telecommunication companies saying now you can save, you can have insurance, they're trying to tap into that. But we have a sector that is largely still not included within the financial sector, within the social protection sector. And also, if you look at, I think they had started this program for the elderly. They say,
Yes.
If you look at it, they say you go to a sub-county, maybe there are 1 or 2 elderly people. The rest are also not covered. So we have a lot of people who are still excluded. They are still being left behind.
Financial inclusion, I find this very often in government programs agenda. When you look at PDM, still one of the underlying pillars is financial inclusion. But still, when the SDGs point out, for example, the women and men, in particular, the poor and the vulnerable, having equal rights of access to economic resources. In Uganda, it seems not to be so. When you look at statistics, it shows that the rich are very rich and the poor are extremely poor and have no access to, first of all, the literacy and the resources they need. How do you think government should tackle this one, especially in as far as including the vulnerable poor men and women is concerned?
Yes, I think I'm going back again to the interrelatedness of the SDGs. You have poverty, you have gender equality, you have decent work and economic growth. All these sort of bring in gender components, they bring in the inclusion aspects. And yes, some of these are not, maybe we are not doing so well. For example, when we look at the number of adults, the percentage of adult population over 15 who have an account, I think they were at about 59%. And the fundamental labor rights to be guaranteed, we have sort of 0.4, maybe where we should be having 1. So we are at 40%. So those are some of the aspects. When you continue looking at each target, each indicator, some of the indicators actually we are not doing so well. So in terms of inclusion, financial inclusion, how do you include somebody? We've talked about these issues of how commercial banks, people have failed to go to commercial banks. You deposit money, if it is an account, the interest rate is low. Also the amount required. And people have resorted to these mobile telecommunication companies as ways of saving. Whether that is financial inclusion, maybe they should be looked into, because some are providing loans now, they are providing credit, so they are there. But still, the financial inclusion needs, that's why people are going in 2 circles. They are trying to find ways in which they can actually also access credit, be able to save, but we still have a long way to go, and especially if we look at men and women, then women still are sort of lagging behind.
Yeah, you're talking about that also. I remember unit trusts have become very popular of recent, where people now are saving with unit trusts because they see their money appreciating with time.
Okay.
Yeah. We're going to take a very quick breather, Dr. Womugasho, and when we return, we want to talk about some of the things that should be included in our plans if we are to achieve some of the things within the SDG Agenda 2030. Some of the things that we've looked at, for example, parish development model and Emyoga and so on, is what government is focusing on. But how about the health sector? How about the financial freedom? People are talking about financial freedom nowadays, and many still feel like they are enslaved in terms of financial freedom. When you look at the mortality rate, the maternal mortality ratio in Uganda, it's still quite high. The doctor to patient ratio, you can see some of the things that are holding us back in achieving the SDGs. My name is Anthony, and of course I'm with Dr. Womugasho, and we are discussing the progress on the SDGs in the Ugandan perspective. Stay with us. We return shortly after this quick break.